The first thing I'll review for you is seam allowances. And on the machine that we all have the same machine, I think. Over here, there's the seam allowances we use most often are 1/4 inch, sometimes 3/8 inch, but the often ones are 1/2 inch and 5/8 inch. All of those they seem like, oh, what's the point? They're different. That little bit, 1/8 of an inch, is very important. So in order to not make my vision go crazy trying to refocus every time, I just stick a sticky note there because I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it's right there. I can put a sticky note. There's also magnets that you can buy that stick on your machine, or you can just keep looking at this machine says 4/8 of an inch, which means half. So I'm going to just do a quick little demo on what would happen. This is how you would do your iPad bag that you're going to make. So basically, we're going to make a pouch. And what the term we use is called bag it. We're going to bag it, meaning I'm going to sew this particular shape. And again, when you start your sewing, right here at the 1/2 inch mark, and my is right in the center, and my tubes are back here, and I have the fabric just a tiny bit before the needle. The reason is I want to start stitching right at the beginning of the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and hold these 2 threads down, either like this or with my finger, so that they don't yank and jam up when I start sewing. You only need to do that for a couple stitches. So now I can let go of that. So I've gone to like 3 stitches, and I'm going to back stitch by holding my reverse key down, going backwards, let go, and then go forward again. So right now I'm watching at the 1/2 inch mark, and I'm just going slowly, making sure that I keep everybody lined up. When I get to within a 1/2 inch of the end here, I want to make a turn. So I'm just going to sort of wing it. Like, I'm going to put the needle down. That looks like 1/2 inch to me, but I have the needle down. I'm going to pick it up and make my turn, and it's about 1/2 inch. So I'm going to continue sewing, and I'm going to go forward ahead of myself and straighten these guys up here so I'm nice and straight. If you cut crooked, just sew straight. Don't follow your crooked cutting, just follow the straight line. So again, it's probably a 1/2 stitch. So I'm going to back it up a little bit just because I want to be accurate. I'm going to put the needle down, and I'm going to make that pivot. And now I'm still at a 1/2 inch. The needle's down, and I go and complete this little bag. I back stitch and then pull it off. So you can see by the back stitching that I did that I ended it very, very close to the edge. And there. So I go back and I'm cutting this off. So I've made a little square bag for what's going to be a future bag. But there's one more thing I need to do. If this is my outside fabric, I need to take the scissors and cut off that corner right there. Because if I turn it in right side out, this piece of fabric is just going to be a wad inside my corner. So I need to clip my corners out of the way, dangerously close to that made, but it's okay. Once we turn it, those 2 corners of fabric sort of hug each other and don't cause it to ravel. So I'm going to make my corner really nice. I take my closed up scissors and I just sort of push it in there like that. I'm not forcing it too much because I don't want to make a hole. I'm sort of tickling it and pulling the fabric around. When I get a really nice corner, I hit this with the iron so that it will stay nice and flat. And then I go and do my other corner. So this is something you can practice to make a little bag. That's what you're going to do in a large version. So this point can be many things. Knowing just this little thing that I showed you can be the flap of a purse, the actual purse itself, or bag. It can be the flap of a pocket where you could sew it into a, and you would have a pocket. So there's many reasons you would love to know how to do. So that is point number 1. Piece of fabric that is going to be, for example, part of a sleeve. And this is why we need a little bit So this is a mimic, you know, an example of a sleeve. A sleeve would have a curve here and then a hump and then curve again. So it goes sort of like, it swings then back down again and swings up again. I've used this before, that's why there's black threads out. So I want this curve here, say between the two notches, which are marks on a pattern. It would be a notch, it's a mark on a pattern. I want to make this part bunch up a little bit, not much. So I'm going to ease stitch it, E-A-S. And normally you would take your and go all the way up to number 4 so that the length is longer, and that makes it is easy to pull. So I'm going ½ inch, very carefully following that curve. If this is a commercial pattern, it's usually 5/8 of an inch. When we make our own patterns, we add an seam allowance, or for commercial patterns are 5/8 the way it is. Industry standards are 1/2 inch seam allowances. That's pretty much what I like to teach. So I made a U-turn of this curve, and I'm going back again, but this time I'm separate about the original stitching, so that I have 2 rows of stitching following this curve that's my sleeve. I'm going to take this off and show you. I know there's a lot of blurring happening on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to exit, and both tails are still intact, meaning the thread where I started and the thread where I ended are still quite long. So I want that. I'm going to take 2 of those threads. It doesn't matter whether you take the top 2 or the bottom 2. I have red on the bottom, or whatever. One side's red, one side's white. But this is the 2 rows that I made. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see it a little better in white. 2 rows of stitching, and black from the last demo. Get out of there. Get out of there. So what I want to do is, like I said, I want to get a gentle curve to this sleeve. So I'm pulling it. I'm taking the 2 threads, not both of them, but not all 4 of them, but 2 of them. So the top 2 or bottom, whichever you want. And when I take my thumb and finger and pull on the fabric, but I'm holding the thread, I have pulled some puckers into the sleeve. So I'm just going to get you pucker. I don't want many, because I want the top of my smooth. I don't want the in it. So I'm going to, that's why you do the whole sleeve cap, so that you can spread them nicely and still get a hump. Is what you're doing, is you're getting a nice stop. You can see that this has a roll to it, because this part here has been puckered by this seam that you've just done. So when you sew that in, you have to be cautious to sew it on a straight. Where is my straight? So what you're doing now is you're sewing a straight, your curved sleeve on a straight piece. So you just match everything up. Do I have pins? I don't. So in the case of a sleeve, you would be pinning it at the shoulder, at the underarm, and at the 2 notches that you have marking your sleeve. So what you're doing is curving your flat piece to fit your curved piece, and you're going to have the curved line. You're sewing something flat onto something curved. You always follow the curve, and the curve will sort of like a road travel and make the straight part. It'll stay straight, and the curved part, it will stay curved when you're done. So I'm just going to close it down. I put my machine back at the 2.5 mark, and I'm just sewing straight taking out my pins as I go. And now I want to make sure while I'm sewing that this part is humped and it's fine. It's supposed to stay that way. But this part here is smooth. I want to keep this part flat. And what I don't want is to sew those puckers in there. So the puckers are fine, just so you can see that the machine's not going to flatten them and make a pucker. So that's an all a visual thing. Manipulating it with my fingers as I go and only working on 1 or 2 inches at a time. You don't have to speed sew and you don't have to rush. It's hard to sew when you're in a hurry. So I'm making the underside curve with this, and I'm following the curve of my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So forcing just a little bit at a time of that bottom part to curve. You can carefully run over pins. I don't like to, but I just did, but you know, sometimes I do. On my industrial machine, I can, it hits the pin. So I could feel some lump underneath there. I want to just smooth that with my fingers. So I followed this curve, but maintaining the straight part underneath. So if this really, when you're done, take it out the machine, and this is what you get. So this is the straight part of your shoulder right here, and this here curved over. Let me put it on full. So this is what we got. This part, the blue is the straight part, like your shoulder, and then the curve, the brown part, that's your sleeve. See how it curved over nicely? That's because we gave it that little bit of ease. And that's what you do on sleeves. Some sleeves are gathered and you're supposed to make all those bunchings, but this would be like a jacket sleeve or a shirt where you don't want to have that, but you still wanted that curve here. So that's what that little ease stitch did for you, is it gave you that curve. So that's one way to do opposing curves, because one is opposing, the other one's straight. And one other way you can make fun things. Let's see, go back to my phone. Here we go. If you want to make something fun, like I have this piece of blue and green fabric, and say I want it, like I cut them out together, right? What if I want to sew those together? Well, that becomes a curve nightmare. So it's easier for me to take a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to flat sew one piece of it really carefully at 1/4 inch, and I'm following the curve. I'm pulling it gently from the back because I can't just let the machine operate by itself. I need to use my hands to pull things and manipulate things. Your hands are the work and the talent, and the machine a little bit of a helper. Just flat sewed that so that I can pull on my curve, distorting it. And I'm going to the other side. These are just flat sewed sewn stitches that if they get in if they show later, you can take them out. Because once I sew these two pieces together, I don't want these to show. These are just sort of reinforcements. And it's actually called a reinforcement stitch, which is just flat sewing the purpose of becoming a structural barricade for me not to so now I'm going to oppose these guys. So you can see that's how I want it to look when it's done being sewn, right? But I should have used printed fabric, but these are fabric, so you can't tell which is the wrong side and which is the right side. But say these are both the right sides, and I want to sew them right side together. So I gotta put them right side together. Well, look what happens. Now they oppose each other. But because we sewed that reinforcement stitch, I know that these line up. So I'm going to line that up. And again, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Basically, I can follow the line that I just made. So that's where you start the line up, in which the intersection sort of makes a little V shape. That's fine. You want that. So I'm going to put that in, and I'm going to sew maybe to a hair to the left of my original stitching. So hopefully I won't show it. And I do want to back stitch. So now now that I'm on, I want to get on first. Now I can start manipulating this. This 1/4 inch, or the next thing I do actually, I like to go to the end because I don't want to have a surprise at the end. So I'm going to go to the end and pin that so that I know how much to work with. I know how much manipulating I have to do here. So I'm going to, this hump is on the bottom and I've got the opposing curve on the, I can clip this if I want. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it is. By clipping it, I leave that tight curve. And then I can line this up with the hump part. So now I'm sew again. I'm right line. Sometimes I take needle nose and pull this top part. I could just use my fingers because I want to pull this to meet. This is very, it's actually quite full here, which is fine. That's going to be full. But this part here where the seam allowance has to be flat. So I'm just going to sew on my flat seam allowance. So now we're opposing in the opposite direction. So you sort of pull from underneath to get those to line up. I'm going to do a couple clips on that underneath and pull it up. It's hard because now I can't see my curve. If you want, you can take this out and start sewing it from the other side so you can see your curve better, because this is a little bit hard to meet. What you could do is also, you could just flip it over and pin it. So that I can get those curves to line up. Because the bottom, the green one, needs to curve. The top blue one does not need to curve. So now I got them lined up with my fingers, all 11 of my fingers. And you just keep checking underneath to make sure the green is still lined up. Make sure you don't have any puckers that you're about to sew underneath. Continue that curve. And I'm almost at the end. I got a little pucker here so I can finish puckering it. So just, sew 2 inches at a time and take a look at what you're doing. So I'm going to flatten that pucker out. So this part that it's tedious work. And I just want you, your assignment is, yes, make a small type of a seam. So, but look what I've got. I can go to the iron and iron this all out nicely. I have a tiny little pucker there, but it was so tiny I was able to scratch it out with my fingernail. Same here. And like I said, reinforcement thing that I put, it shows a little bit, that red. I could pull that out because it's not really holding these two pieces together. You can see how opposing curves, albeit difficult they can be a really cool design feature. You can do the same thing with a square by having an opposing square, and to have it, when you open it flat, you've got a square piece, but it's still flat. So these two assignments for you guys, you can have them. I don't think you necessarily have to have them by the end of today, but if you have them for me at the beginning of next class, that would be great. Do you have questions?